Aloha, everybody. My name is Shelby Morrison, and I am the Programs and Communications Coordinator at Ikahi Mediation Center. Welcome to our Finding Solutions Growing Peace Brown Bag Lunch series. Ikahi is a nonprofit community mediation center serving East Hawaii. We were founded in 1983 as a program of the island of Hawaii's YMCA, and in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit. We empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options, and to find their own best solutions. To achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and trainings just like this one to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. Our Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon here on Zoom. You need to register on Eventbrite each time to receive that Zoom link. Some other exciting events we have coming up is our next Brown Bag, which will be on June 18th. And this will be with workplace coach and employment litigator, Elizabeth Gutier, and her talk is titled, I Know You Are, But What Am I? Managing Conflict Maturely When Emotions Are High. You can register for this on Eventbrite, and the link is in the chat. Some other events, we have our conflict prevention and resolution training series. We'll be having another session on June 4th with our very own executive director, Julie Mitchell, and her workshop is titled Work Together Effectively as a Nonprofit Board. The investment is $50 with group discounts and needs-based scholarships available. It will be held at the University of Hilo, UCB 127, from 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And you can register for that with the link in the chat. On July 23rd, we'll be hosting our preview party to kick off the 2026 annual Orchid Show and Sale in Hilo. This fundraiser will run from 6 to 9 at the Edith Kanakaloa Stadium. The evening gala features a generous selection of fine wines, beers on tap, and other hard and soft beverages, delectable catered food, live music, and orchid viewing and pre-sales. Ticket proceeds will benefit Ikahi Mediation Center's cause of peace, and a silent auction proceeds will benefit the Hilo Orchid Society's scholarship fund. Tickets are $115, of which $40 is tax deductible and includes a souvenir beer or wine glass. Tickets can be found on our website, or of course, you can also stop by in person or pick up tickets from the Most Irresistible shop coming up soon. Feel free to visit the link in the chat for more details. Our next basic mediation training starts on September 24th. This 3-day training is how our professionally trained volunteer mediators get their start. These fabulous folks donate their time to help community members communicate, negotiate, and resolve disputes. And we're always looking for additional community members to learn conflict prevention and resolution skills. So please do consider joining our Mediator Apprentice program. Registration closes on September 18th, and we do offer partial needs-based scholarships. More information can be found with the link in the chat. At the end of today's talk, you'll be asked to fill out a short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. So when I put the survey link in the chat at the end of the talk, please just take a moment to give us your thoughts. I'll also be sending out an email tomorrow with the PDF of today's slides and that video link and a survey link once more. So without further ado, let me introduce our topic, anger introspection. Is your anger working for you? And our speaker is Miss Robin Paggi, who is a self-employed human resources consultant from Bakersfield, California. Her area of expertise is in creating and delivering training and coaching. Paggi holds numerous HR and professional certifications and 3 master's degrees in communication studies, interdisciplinary studies, and psychology. She co-authored the 2021 book, Managing Generation Z, How to Recruit, Onboard, Develop, and retain the newest generation in the workplace. Take it away, Robin.
Thank you. I wish I were in Hawaii presenting this, but I'm in beautiful Bakersfield, California, where it's a lovely 91 degrees. I was so happy to be with you today. You
And
and
Robin, we actually are seeing a different screen. We're not seeing your presentation yet.
oh, okay. Well, let me see what I can do about that. How about now? Can you see it?
No, we're seeing the news article site.
Well, we don't want that. All right. How about now?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Very good. Thank you, Shelby. So let's just dive right in. What were you taught about anger? Chances are you were taught that it's bad, that you should never go to bed angry. I Googled what some thoughts were about anger and came up with these. A man is about as big as the things that make him angry. And that doesn't sound very good. One's anger is one's greatest enemy, and one's calmness is one's protection. Again, that doesn't sound good. An angry man opens his mouth and shuts his eyes. And the instant we feel anger, we have already ceased striving for the truth and have begun striving for ourselves. I think all of those have a grain of truth in them. However, I think they give anger a bad rap. Anger is not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, anger is a valid emotion that we need and we have always needed. Now, I do have a psychology degree. One of my favorite magazines is Psychology Magazine, and I strongly recommend it because it's very easy to read, and I find all sorts of fun tidbits that I can incorporate into my training and my coaching. And I found a lot of the information that I'm about to tell you in Psychology Today magazine. Here's a little bit of it. Anger is a resource for physical and psychological survival. Anger leads a person to destroy the barriers preventing satisfaction of some important need. Anger has played an important role in the evolution and physical survival of humans. When barriers to food, water, shelter, mating, and safety presented themselves, anger gave humans the energy to attack the barrier, destroy or remove it, and survive. So, this is how I imagine things went. Way back when people were cave dwellers, and you're out and you work all day long to get something to eat, and you're back at your fire and you're eating, and somebody comes and tries to steal your food. Anger gives you the energy you need to keep your food, even after you spend all day long trying to get it and you're tired. Or anger helps you when you find shelter and you move into your cave, but somebody else wants your cave. So anger gives you the energy to be able to make them go away so that you can have what you need. And so it totally makes sense to me anyway, that especially during thousands of years ago, people really needed anger to be able to just keep living and survive. But what about now? Do we still need anger? I mean, most of us aren't going out and spending all day getting our food. But yes, we still need anger. If we didn't need anger, then it probably would have just dissipated over thousands of years. Anger is a very valid emotion, and we need it. And we need it because it gives us energy to right the wrong. So the problem is not with anger. The problem is that most people don't know how to effectively control or express their anger. So I typically in my workshops ask people about this time, where did you learn how to express your anger? Or where did you learn how to handle conflict? And most people say, my parents or whoever raised them. And that's true. And one of the things that amuses me a lot is when people will say, well, we're all adults. We should be able to handle this without everybody getting upset. And that amuses me because it makes me think that when we're 18 years old, some fairy comes along and touches us with their magic wand, and then all of a sudden we know how to handle everything in the adult world. How we handle things is based in large part upon how we saw people handle them before us. And I don't know about you, I love my parents to death, but they were not good role models when it came to how to handle and express anger or how to resolve conflict. So for a long time, I was really bad at it too. And then, fortunately for me, I went to college and I went into human resources and I went to more college and I learned and learned and learned how to effectively express anger. And so I want to share with you what I've learned. But first, let's look at how do people ineffectively express it. You probably already know the answer to that. First of all, a lot of people express their anger physically. They throw things, they slam doors, they assault people, and murder. Now, years ago, when I gave this presentation or in a workshop format, and we got to murder, people would kind of chuckle because that just seems so far off. But now it doesn't seem that far-fetched for people to be so upset that they murder other people. Now, where I live, unfortunately, our homicide rate is pretty high in the county where I am. And when I read in the paper about different homicides, I think people must have been pretty angry with each other to make that happen. The one that I read about in yesterday's paper was a family member stabbing another family member at a graduation event. So people don't know how to handle their anger, especially when there's alcohol involved. Or emotional, giving the silent treatment, verbal abuse, holding grudges. Now, one of the things that I learned in psychology is that we hold grudges for a kind of good reason. One of the reasons that we do is so that people won't hurt us. And when we had to rely upon our memory for a lot of things before people could write things down, we had to store a lot of things in our memory. And we needed to store away when people hurt us because we don't want them to hurt us again. Unfortunately, we just kept that tradition going, even though we can write things down and we can remember things. So we keep those grudges to prevent people from hurting us. Unfortunately, we end up hurting ourselves when we hold grudges. Pouting, martyr behavior. If you're wondering what that is, I'll ask you if you have a martyr in your family. That's the person who goes on and on about how ill-treated they are, or you all go ahead to the party, I'll stay here and clean up, or you go have a fabulous life, I'll stay back and take care of mom and dad. That's the martyr. Or gossiping. And gossiping is spreading true information just as much as spreading false information. But the purpose of gossip is to hurt people. And so if you don't physically hurt people, you can emotionally hurt people. And then one of the things that people do when they get angry is they hurt themselves. Too much food, too much alcohol, drugs, whatever. When we get upset, sometimes we hurt ourselves. And maybe we're hurting ourselves because we're upset with ourselves. And we are abusing ourselves to punish ourselves for whatever we did that made us angry with ourselves. So all of that is no good. And I think that's one of the reasons that anger has such a bad rap, is because this is what people end up doing when they get angry for the most part. But you don't have to do that. You can learn a better way. And when you learn the better way, you can use your anger to make things happen that should happen, that you can right the wrongs that are in your life. As Shelby mentioned, I have a master's degree in communication studies, and I have been very fortunate to have spent my career teaching communication classes at the college level and also teaching communication workshops. It took me 5 times of changing my major when I was an undergrad until I finally got to communication. I am so glad that I changed majors 4 different times until I finally got to this one, because this has been such a great thing for me to know and expand my knowledge on and to be able to teach other people. And that is about communication, which is much more difficult than people think it usually is. So this is what I've learned from one of my conflict resolution textbooks is that communication behavior often creates conflict. And again, when we are angry, we get into conflict. And so I'm using these interchangeably to a certain degree. Now, how does communication behavior create conflict? I do a lot of work in workshops and coaching one-on-one with personality styles. My favorite is the Myers-Briggs, which someone in one of my workshops yesterday told me, I don't put much credence in that. It's not scientifically valid. And I said, I understand that. However, knowing information about personality styles, especially how Myers-Briggs talked about personality styles, has helped me tremendously, both personally and professionally. And one of the things that I know is that our personality style has a huge impact on us, whether you believe in personality assessments or not. We have different personality styles. Our personality styles impact how we communicate with other people. And sometimes we think that we're communicating just fine, but other people don't think so. And I know this is certainly true of my personality style. In Myers-Briggs, if you're familiar with that, I'm an extroverted thinker. And extroverted thinkers just say what's on their mind, and it sounds kind of harsh sometimes, kind of critical sometimes, kind of condescending sometimes. And people tend to not to like that, which was a surprise to me. Fortunately, I had people in my life who pointed that out to me. So communication behavior often creates conflict for other people. We don't have to try to cause conflict. Just naturally coming across as the way we do can cause conflict for people. Communication behavior often reflects conflict. So some people are really good at hiding their feelings and they don't wear them out on their sleeve or right on their faces like I do. But when I'm upset, people know that I'm upset. My voice responds or reflects it. My facial expressions reflect it. And so communication behavior reflects when people are angry. And communication is the vehicle for the productive or the destructive management of conflict. Now, for a lot of people, communication makes conflict worse. And we go back to Myers-Briggs, introversion and extroversion. Extroverts tend to think that talking about things makes it better, while introverts tend to think that talking about things makes it worse. And that's one of the things, if you don't even want to talk about what's bothering you, then that's going to be a big problem, especially for people who really need you to talk about it. But a lot of times when we do talk about our anger with people, it just makes things worse because we don't know how to talk about it in a way that makes things better. And when you learn how to express your feelings or perceptions or anger in a way that inspires people to try to work with you to resolve it, then that makes things better. I coach people one-on-one, as I mentioned, and I had a coaching session this morning with a young woman, and this was our second coaching session. In our first coaching session, she had said that she was upset with somebody, but she didn't want to say anything because she was just afraid that it would mess things up even more. Especially the person that she was upset with is higher up on the hierarchy at work than she is. And she really was afraid if she said anything that that could be a real problem for her. So we talked about, well, how can you express yourself in a way? Because if you don't, you're just going to carry this with you. And this is going to negatively impact your working relationship with this person and possibly other parts of your work life. So how can you express yourself to this person so that they are not offended by it, but yet you get you're not angry anymore and you get the change that you want from this person. And so we discussed how to do that about a month ago. And then I met her today, and I'm very happy to report that she said she had the conversation with the person, and the person was very receptive to her feedback and her request for change. And that person's behavior had changed toward her, but it was for the better. It seemed like that person respected her even more now since she spoke up. And so that was a great little success story at the beginning of my day today. And so I want to share with you what I shared with her, and hopefully you can get the same response from people that you're angry with and you need to tell them about it. Before we go any further, though, I want to remind you of this quote, and that is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. And why do I put that up there now? Well, one of the things that I want to remind you is that before we focus on, I need to express myself to this person, we need to remind ourselves that going into a conversation with somebody, we really want to find out what's going on with them. If they did something that we're offended by, that made us angry, then instead of focusing on, I need to tell you that I'm angry and I don't want you to do that again, we need to be curious about what prompted their behavior in the first place. And when we seek first to understand and then to be understood, then it changes the dynamic of the situation in a good way. It makes us curious as opposed to resentful or combative or what have you. The other thing that I want to insert in here before we go any further, it's a little bit further in my PowerPoint, but I want to say it now and then I'll emphasize it again. We communicate to get a desired response from our audience. Every time we say something, it's to get a specific response back. So if I say hello, I want someone to say hello. If I ask a question, I want them to answer. If I tell a joke, I want them to laugh. That's not just me, that's everybody. That's why we communicate, to get a desired response from our audience. And so I strongly encourage you, every time you go to have a conversation with somebody that is critical, it's important, think about the response that you want and then tailor your message to get that response. And that's what we're going to talk about next. And one of the things that I learned, body was not designed to store anger. And I think that that's a lovely way of saying that when you store anger inside of you, well, first of all, it's going to come out. And for some of us, it just comes out. And for some of us, it comes out in little bits and pieces here and there over time. And one of the things that we need to recognize is, again, why we have anger and why we're not supposed to hold on to it. Anger is supposed to give us energy to correct the situation immediately. And when we don't correct the situation and we hold on to that anger, it begins to eat us up on the inside. And that is not hyperbole. A lot of medical information demonstrates that stored up stress and trauma and anger and those types of things just literally eats away at our insides. And one of the things that I always reference at this part of my presentation is how animals have little bits of anger or stress when they think that they're in danger, and how they expend it, and how we need to do the same. So imagine that a deer is grazing in a nice meadow and everything's calm and the deer is calm. And then all of a sudden the deer hears a noise and the deer looks up and realizes that there is a threat. A predator is in their midst. And so anger or stress or just all of those chemicals that feel the same way leads the deer to run as fast as they possibly can out of danger. And then as soon as they're out of danger, All of that is expended, and then they go back to grazing calmly in a meadow somewhere. That's what anger is supposed to do for us. It is supposed to give us that burst of energy that we need to right the wrong. So when we keep it all stored up, again, it's going to come out in little bits and pieces. And while it's in there, it's going to harm us. And obviously, we don't want that. So we need to learn how to express our anger in a way that inspires the responses that we want. Once again, we communicate to get a desired response. Think about the response that you want from that person at the end of your conversation, and then work to get that response. And so the big question is, well, how do you do it? Here's how. First of all, identify why you are angry. Now, sometimes it's obvious why we're angry, but sometimes somebody's pushed our buttons and we can't really figure it out. We just know that we're discombobulated to a certain way or in a certain way. And so I'll give you an example of how sometimes we know we're upset, we just don't know why we're upset. One of the things that I have the opportunity to do is write articles about HR issues. And typically it is written for employers so that they can navigate the HR world, especially in California, where I'm from. We have way more employment laws than any other place in the state. And it's a little tricky trying to do business here without getting sued by your employees. And so my articles are generally, that's who my audience is employers, and I'm giving them advice. And one day I had a friend of mine who is an employer, and she said to me, I read your latest article, and I just thought, wow, the people that you talked about, that was just a really silly thing that they sued their employer over. And I didn't think it was a silly thing. And I said, well, no, it wasn't silly because of this. And she said, oh, I didn't get that when I read your article. All right, well, she pushed a button. And the button that she pushed, it took me a little while to figure out. But if I'm writing to help employers and she's an employer and she's telling me that she did not understand my article, then that means I'm a bad writer, right? All right. So that's what I finally figured out. So sometimes we need to do a little digging to identify why we're angry, and sometimes it's really obvious, but that's the first step. Next, we want to approach the person that we're angry with an attitude of collaboration. Collaboration is one of the choices that we have on how to approach conflict. And we have 5 different ways that we can approach conflict. One is that we can avoid it altogether, which sometimes is the best thing to do. But if you always avoid, you'll never have your issues taken care of. Another is to accommodate, and accommodate means just give in. And sometimes that is the best thing to do. But if you always accommodate, then you're going to be unhappy. Another way to approach conflict is to compete, which means I'm going to win and you're going to lose. And if you always compete, then you're always going to put people in a losing situation, which in the long run is not good for you. So competing every once in a while is good, but not always. Another way to approach conflict is to compromise, which means I'm going to give in so I can get. And a lot of times compromising is what we need to do. But collaboration is the 5th way that we can approach conflict. And collaboration means I want to win, but I want you to win too. Now, we typically have our go-to approach that we use. It's what comes naturally to us, based in large part upon our personality style. As an extroverted thinker, my go-to is competing. I'm going to win and you're going to lose. And it took me a long time to be able to recognize that sometimes avoiding is the better way to do things, and just leave it alone and ignore that person or what have you. And it took every ounce of strength I had to learn how to avoid situations. So our go-to works about a fifth of the time. Other times we need to approach conflict or our anger in different ways. What we should try to do as much as possible is approach the situation with collaboration. I want to win. I want you to win. And then we need to think before we speak. Now, some of us, we do. We think before we speak. We think a long time before we speak. And those of us who are more extroverted, we don't. And that gets us in trouble sometimes. We just open mouth and stuff comes out that we haven't even prepared to come out. And then we'll just see what happens afterwards. So that is not a good strategy. And so we need to think before we speak. Maybe we write things down to make sure our word choice is the best. And then when we go talk to the person, we need to be brief and to the point. We don't want to go on and on and on and on, but we do want to be specific and give examples of what we are angry about. We want to talk about our feelings and our perception using I messages. You're probably well aware of what I messages are. If you go into a conversation and say, "You made me angry," that puts people on the defense. But when you say, "I was angry when you made that remark in the meeting today," then they're on less of a defense. Now, I want to pause here and I want to say one of the things that I have learned is that no one can make you feel anything. And I mean, kind of. But I have a very good friend, and he and I will look at the same situation or be involved in the same situation, and I'll be irritated by it, and he'll be amused by it. So we see life the way we are, not the way life is, and we need to own our emotions. People can inspire how we feel about things, but they can't make us feel what we feel. So we need to own our feelings by saying, "I felt this way when you did this," or "My perception of the situation is this." Speak slowly and in a low tone. And you don't want to speak too slowly, but one of the things that happens sometimes when we get upset is our voice goes higher and higher, and that can send people into the fight or flight syndrome. We need to make sure we continue to breathe, because speaking of the fight or flight syndrome, one of the things that happens to us when we have conversations like this, or we're about to, is that our body will throw us into the fight or flight syndrome. It thinks that we've got a threat that we need to prepare for. And our heart starts beating so that it gets blood to our arms and to our legs. Our body temperature goes up. Our air conditioning unit kicks in, which means we start sweating. Our adrenal gland is in full effect. So we've got lots of adrenaline, which makes us shake sometimes. Our frontal lobe thinks it doesn't need to be engaged anymore, so it frequently goes blank. We get dry mouth, and our digestive system shuts down. And so that's frequently when you are upset or nervous about something, you might feel sick to your stomach. And so that is the fight or flight syndrome. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, we have it so that we have the energy to fight the threat or to run as fast as we possibly can. That's one of the reasons that people avoid conversations like this, is because all of that's happening to their body and it doesn't feel good. So breathing helps to calm all of that down, get oxygen into the frontal lobe so you can remember what you're going to say. Fun fact, I teach public speaking at our local university, and my students go into the same reaction when they're about to give a speech. And so I give them the same advice: nice, deep breaths, and prepare for the situation. Now, when you're talking to the person, establish and maintain eye contact, but not too much, because then that can look threatening. And after you said your piece, briefly, calmly, specific examples using I messages, talking about your feelings and your perceptions, you give the other person the chance to talk. Now, this is the seek to understand. I want to understand why this happened. I just want to hear your side of the story. Listen intently, no interrupting, no justification, just try to understand. And here's the most important thing about the whole thing: make an action plan to solve the problem. Now, when you are thinking of the desired response that you want from the other person before you go into it, this is what you need to focus on. I want this person to collaborate with me to create an action plan so that we never have to have this conversation again. That's the desired response that I want. And so if you start with that end in mind, I want to make an action plan with this person so that this never happens again, then that can really help you with leading that conversation. So I had the opportunity to try all of this out several times, and I'm going to give you two examples. One is a work example, and one is a personal example. When I was employed with a law firm, I had a quarterly bonus structure. And I had various things that I needed to accomplish to get so much money on my bonus. And I would keep track of all of the things that I needed to accomplish. And then I would tell my supervisor, this is how much my bonus is supposed to be this quarter. So we just started this. My supervisor and I created this plan together. And then my first time, I'm sending her information about this is all that I've accomplished. And based upon our plan, this is how much you owe me on my quarterly bonus. And so I sent my plan to her and I said, this is how much you owe me. And then I received my paycheck, and my bonus was not nearly as much as I thought it was going to be. So let's go through the scenario. Identify why you're angry. That was easy. I didn't need to work too much on that one. So I needed to talk to my boss about the fact that I felt that she owed me more money. My boss was very introverted. I'm very extroverted. She preferred electronic communication. I prefer face-to-face. As an extrovert, I was used to just barging into people's offices and talking to them when I needed to talk to them. And I knew if I approached this situation in my normal way and also in my competitive mode, I was not going to get the money I thought that I deserved. As a matter of fact, I might lose my job. So I thought very carefully, how do I approach this situation? So before I did anything else, I emailed her preferred method of communication. And I said to her, I would like to talk to you about my quarterly bonus when you have time. Now, it's very difficult for me to wait when I want to talk to somebody about something. But I knew that if I rushed this, that was going to end up not working well for me. So she let me know when it would be a good time for her to talk, and I waited, and then I went to her office. Now, that was good too in her office, because in her office, it's her territory, and she has more control over the situation. One of the things that I teach supervisors, when you're going to have a difficult conversation with an employee, you don't have it in your office because it's your territory. And also, you don't have it sitting behind your desk because then that's adversarial. You're on one side and the employee's on the other. So that's what I teach supervisors. But going into this, I was glad it was in her office and she's behind her desk because I knew that would make her feel safer. Because I knew she did not want to talk to me about anything that I was upset about, because she hated those kind of conversations, especially with me. So I went to her at the appointed time and I said this. As I said in my email, I'd like to talk to you about my quarterly bonus. I thought, based on my bonus plan, that I was going to make more money than this. I'm frustrated because I thought I did what I needed to do to make more. I'm hoping we can talk about this and come to a resolution that works for both of us. So let's go back to our screen. I was brief and to the point. I was specific and gave examples. I talked about my feelings and my perception using I words. I remembered that I was really aware of how loud I am. I'm normally very loud, so I made sure that my voice was softer and my face. I frequently look angry, especially when I'm upset about something. So I had to make sure I'm controlling my face and my body language and all of that. And then I asked her to talk, all the while saying that what I'm hoping for is that we can work together to create a plan. So that conversation went very well. When I said, I'm hoping that we can talk about this to come to a resolution, what she said to me was, well, I thought you understood that there's a cap on how much of a bonus you can get, that it doesn't matter how much revenue you generate, that there is a cap. And so I thought you understood that. However, this is the first time through, and so I'll tell you what I'll do. I will give you half the amount you think I now owe you. And then just going forward, know that there's a cap. All right. Well, we ended up compromising. She gave me a little bit more money. I didn't get as much as I wanted. But here's what you need to do in situations like that is that when you walk away, you focus on what you got, not on what you didn't get. And that's what people frequently do. They focus on what they did not get. And why do you focus on what you got? Because it makes you happier. So that's one of the things that I really know is that we have a choice. We have a choice on how we view things. We have a choice on how we feel about things, and we have a choice on what we focus on. And so I encourage people, when you compromise, you're going to give up something. Focus on what you got. It will make you happier. All right, so that was my work situation. It worked out quite nicely for me. And this is the format that I gave the young woman that I was coaching. And she had her conversation with somebody at work that she was upset with. And she told me today it worked out very nicely. And so hopefully it will work out nicely for you. So next time you go to talk to somebody that you are angry with, think about the situation. And before you go talk to them, describe what happened, when it happened, how often it happened, that type of thing. So that's your specifics and that's your examples. We never want to say things like, you never helped. Well, I helped yesterday. Or you always. We don't want to do that because none of that is true. So be very specific. Again, describe how you feel or your perception of the situation and what do you want to have happen now. Now, one of the things that you want to do also is make sure you end on a positive note, even if you don't get what you want. So let's go back to my boss and let's say I said all of that to her and she said, well, I'm sorry you misunderstood, but I thought it was clear. And so therefore, I'm not giving you any more money. My response to that would have been, thank you for your time. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, I know as an introvert, she needs to think before she takes action. She's not comfortable taking action immediately without thinking about it first. And so because she answered, she might think after I left the room, well, I do have a little bit more money in the budget and maybe, okay, so she could have changed her mind after the pressure was off. The other reason that I would have said, well, thank you for your time is because ultimately she still made employment decisions about me. And if I would have blew up at that point or stormed out or done whatever, then she could have decided that I didn't need to be there anymore. So it's in our best interest, even when the immediate result is not what we want, that we end the conversation on a good note. All right, so I promised you a personal example, and here it goes. My husband and I have a couple that we hang out with quite a bit, and they invited us to meet him for dinner on a Friday evening, and my husband and I drove there separately after work. And after we finished eating, my friends and I are chatting, and my husband turned to me and he said, "Let's go." And I said, "I'm not ready to go." And then I remembered that we had separate cars, and I said, "You've got your car here. You can go if you want to." And he was so upset with me, and he let me know that. And so we left. We came home. We have a two-story house, which is nice for situations like this. That whole adage, never go to bed angry, I don't buy into it. So I went upstairs, he's downstairs, and so we're not talking for the rest of the evening. Now, the next day, I said to him, "Why did you get so upset when I said you have your car, you can leave if you want to?" He said, "You were dismissing me in front of our friends." So that didn't make me feel good. And I said, "Okay, well, that was not my intent. I thought I was being logical." And he said, "Why didn't you get so upset when I said, 'let's go'?" And I said, "Because you told me, 'let's go.' You didn't ask me if I wanted to go. And so I don't appreciate you telling me what we're going to do." And he said, "Okay, if I ask you, are you about ready to go? Would that be better?" And I said, "Yes. And if you do that, I'll be ready to go in no more than 10 minutes. Would that work?" And he said, "Yes. As long as I know it's 10 minutes, we're good." Great. We've got a plan. Yay. We hugged it out. We couldn't wait to try our plan out. So we went out to dinner with the same couple a little bit later. We finished eating, we're talking, and he turned to me and he said, I mean, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "I am ready to go. Let's go." And off we went. And we were so proud of ourselves that we could finally figure that out. And then we were only married about 25 years when we finally figured that out. By the way, yesterday was our 37th wedding anniversary. So we've been doing pretty well with this format since that time. And so that's what I tell you is that make a plan, try to express yourself so that they understand you, ask them so that you can understand them, and then how can we never have to have this conversation again? And always remember, we communicate to get a desired response. So make sure that you're sending your messages in a way to get the response that you want. Now, a couple more things before we open it up for questions. Well, I'm telling you how to express your anger to somebody. What if somebody comes to you and they tell you that they're angry with you? And especially if this totally surprises you because you had no idea that you had anything to do with making them angry. Here's a little format. First of all, show interest and concern. Now, one of the things that people still have a tendency to think is that they can multitask. Multitasking is a myth. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people are on their phones or on their computers and trying to listen to people at the same time. I frequently have them in my workshops, and it makes me angry. To show people that you care about them, you give them all of your attention. And then a lot of times people are not good at telling you why they're upset, so you might need to seek additional clarifying information from them. Agree with some aspect of the complaint, and then ask for suggestions of alternatives. Now, I can show you this format and just show that to you, and you could take it a couple of different ways. So, for example, seeking additional clarifying information does not sound like this. "Well, why would you get mad about that?" "Well, why would that upset you?" "Well, how did I?" Okay, that's not how you do it. And then asking for suggestions does not sound like this. "Well, what do you want me to do?" Okay, so let me just role play for you how all of this would sound. Say you come to me and I'm busy on my phone or computer, and you say, "Robin, I want to talk to you about something." And I turn to you and I say, "Oh, okay, I'm all yours." And you say, "Well, you embarrassed me in the workshop yesterday. And I say, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I don't even remember anything that I did that might have embarrassed you. And so, can you tell me exactly what I did so that I understand what's happening? And then if somebody says, well, you yelled at me to get off my phone, and I say, okay, I understand why that would be embarrassing. And so then maybe I say, however, I did tell people that they needed to get off their phones so that they could pay attention. And so how should I handle this situation in the future? If I ask people to put the phones away and all of that, and somebody is still on their phone, instead of saying, hey, can you get off your phone? What should I do in the future so that I don't get anybody angry with me? By the way, that really happened yesterday. All right, so that's one of the things that you can do. So again, when somebody says that they are angry with you, and it might be a shock that I didn't even know I did anything to make anybody angry. Think about how you want the whole conversation to end and on a good note so that you can resolve the issue and move forward together. Now, I like this little cartoon, these little beans. One says, things aren't working. I must exert more control. And the other says, things aren't working. I need to let go. And the one who lets go floats away peacefully. And the one who's trying to exert more control just gets more and more aggravated. And I know exactly how they feel. So we are going to have to live with some people who we just, no matter how many times we try to express in the best way possible that we are angry with them, it's never going to work. And sometimes it's not even worth the conversation because avoiding sometimes is the best way to handle situations. So if we have to live with somebody who makes us angry and there's no point in even talking to them about it, then let's do the following. Let's stop complaining about it with everybody in our orbit because the more we complain about it, the more it's living in our head. And if we just keep talking about it, then it's just going to keep living. Stop trying to collect allies. That's one of the things that we do when we're upset with somebody. We talk to people so that they'll be on our side. And this is one of the things I love about mediating conflicts is listening to people tell their side of the story. Everybody who tells their story is the victim in their story. It doesn't matter who they are. People never usually say, yeah, this is a conflict and this is how I contributed to this conflict. People just say, I wasn't doing anything. And then this person got mad at me. And so we collect allies by telling our story, and we are the victim, so we can get people on our side in case we need to go to battle with the other person. Stop doing that. It just keeps the whole thing alive. Stop feeling sorry for yourself because if you really feel that you are the victim, then you're not going to be able to dig yourself out of that hole. And so instead of feeling sorry for yourself that you have to interact with people who make you angry and there's nothing you can do about it, implement coping strategies. And the best coping strategy is exercise. Exercise, you get the best workout you've ever had when you're upset. Get it all out and you'll benefit because you had a great workout. And I want to share some information about the Buddhist philosophy of anger. Understand that we often attribute our anger to external causes or to other people, whereas it is more practical to change ourselves and our attitude. The source of the conflict may lie in our own rigid attitude. And so once again, if we don't have control over anybody else, we only have control over us. And how we decide to think about anger and feel about anger and all of that is basically up to us. We see the world based upon who we are. and not how the world is. And so if we have a lot of people or a lot of things that are making us angry, maybe it's not them, maybe it's us. And maybe we need to figure out what we can do to help ourselves be less angry all the time. I want to end with this quote by Ronald Reagan. Peace is not absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. And once I learned this format on how to tell people when I'm upset with them, whether at work or in my personal life, I haven't had to have those conversations very much anymore because I learned a lot about whether it's worth having the conversation, whether it's really my issue, or when I do have these conversations, it just makes things much smoother all the way around. And so I really hope that you've taken a thing or two from this workshop that will help you express your anger and help it work for you. And I thank you very much, and I'd love to hear if you have any questions.
If you have any questions for Robin, please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. I'll ask a question, Robin. So, while anger isn't always an emotion that is very productive, I wonder if there's ever a valid reason, or if it's ever helpful to actually show some anger to express that whatever was done or wasn't done actually caused you some grief and some pain, rather than trying to neutralize yourself so that the other person hears you. Like, is there ever a time when you feel like maybe showing a little bit of anger, your true feelings, is helpful, even if it doesn't resolve the situation, but sometimes just expressing that can be helpful?
Absolutely. And one of the things, I think it does help the situation. So I did not mean to imply that you need to be that your message needs to be totally bland and devoid of emotion. Yes, expressing your emotion sometimes is very much part of it because people can see how hurt you are. And as a matter of fact, when I was going through my Myers-Briggs training, I had an instructor who gave a great example of that. As a thinker, when she would try to reason with her son on why he shouldn't go to school, she was kind of devoid of emotion. And she would say, if you keep cutting school, then you will not graduate. And if you don't graduate, then you won't go to college. And if you don't go to college, and so she would just keep going down this logical sequence of, if you keep skipping school, this is what's going to happen to you. And it didn't change his behavior. And what changed his behavior is when she went to him and she said, when I got the call from the school today, it made me sick to my stomach. I am failing you as a parent. I am trying to be both your mom and your dad, and obviously I am failing you, and I am so sorry. And that's what got him to go to school. So yeah, definitely. And that wasn't necessarily anger that she's expressing, but that is, yes, you don't want to be totally devoid of emotion. You just want to make sure that you're controlling it.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you all for coming today. And thank you to Robin. If everyone wants to give her a great mahalo, Robin, feel free to put some thanks in the chats for her. This was such a wonderful topic. And whether or not this is new information or information you're already slightly familiar with, we could always use a refresher on how to handle these really powerful emotions and communicate our needs. So as a reminder, please just take a few minutes to fill out our short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. I will pop that link into the chat. And then, of course, keep your eye on your emails tomorrow for the slides from Robin, the video link to rewatch this wonderful presentation, and that survey link once more. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you next month. Mahalo.